What if Bella gets kidnapped by Dracula? The forest was silent, too silent. Snow fell softly, hiding the sound of footsteps that were not human. Bella ran, but some monsters don't chase. They wait, and once they choose you there is no escape. My body was exhausted, yet I pushed myself forward stupidly, trying with ferocious movements to remove myself from this situation. My body trembled, and my legs felt completely numb. I wouldn't be able to go on much longer. The fresh snow fell on my face in tiny plops, the first snow of the season. How ironic that the time of year I hated most would be the last season I'd live. I tripped over a branch and fell, stupidly, onto the wet ground. I stayed there, not even bothering to get up and move. I was terrified, scared beyond control, and I felt my body shaking. It wouldn't be long before they found me now. I was actually surprised that they hadn't found me already. Well, I heard the familiar voice and cringed into the ground. What do we have here? Trying to run, are we, child? I couldn't fight as the cold stone arms embraced me, carrying me through the forest with blinding speed. I was so tired, so tired. Death would be a relief at this point. I screamed out in pain as I felt the arms release me, not understanding why he couldn't just be quick about it. What had I done to deserve the death this man was torturing me with? I heard a snarl, and suddenly the sound cut off. I opened my eyes to see another one. Another vampire. He was standing in front of the evil one, his red eyes darting from me to the man. He was beautiful, of course, just like the rest of them. Let her go, James. He commanded, his voice hoarse. So that was his name. Great. The one named James chuckled darkly. I see you've given in, Edward. Edward lowered his head in shame as James continued. It's about time. Now you can join us. Edward let out another snarl, and I felt the throbbing pain in my leg. I'd hit it pretty hard. I whimpered and flinched as Edward turned to stare at me. Then he growled again. Let the girl go, James. James chuckled. Too bad for her. I was just hunting. I'm very thirsty. I'm sure you understand. You can smell her, can you not? Edward hissed, shutting his eyes in concentration. The fear engulfed me, and I knew now that both of these creatures wanted to kill me. I couldn't seem to wake up. Couldn't seem to find my eyes. My dream tugged at my memory, trying to tell me something, I was sure. Isabella, is that your name? A velvet voice asked. I recognized the voice and I almost screamed in terror. I fluttered my eyelids, trying to focus in on his face. This may be the last thing I saw before I died. I wondered what Jacob would do. What Charlie and Renee would do. The tears came to my eyes, and I blinked them back furiously, trying to see something. Anything. When I finally saw his face, his lovely, beautiful face, I flinched back. His expression was tight, but still curious. He was close enough to touch, and I felt the genuine fear course through my veins. You're all right now, he mumbled, taking a few steps back from me. He won't hurt you. I stared up at him through wet eyes, trying to comprehend. My mind was jumbled, like a bunch of mashed up memories smashed together. I had a headache so bad that my ears were ringing. I'd never felt so much stress, and I was surprised that I was able to stay conscious. He took in my expression. Seriously, he whispered sullenly, I'm not going to hurt you. You can sleep now. You must be tired. I took in his bright red eyes, his jaw clenched in what I assumed was restraint from draining my blood, and I knew that I was not safe. I watched him warily, and he sighed loudly. Tell me what you're thinking. He exclaimed, frustrated. I wasn't able to speak for a few moments, but when he gave me a deadly glare, the words tumbled out. I'm trying to understand why you're doing this right now. What? He asked. I'm trying to understand why I'm not dead. Why you haven't killed me. He sucked in a breath, and then winced. I'm trying to understand that too. He said, so quietly I wasn't sure I was meant to hear. I knew that the strange creature in front of me was not safe. And yet, I couldn't help but feel slightly calmed by his presence. I had no idea why, and it scared me. My thoughts flashed again to Jacob and Charlie. I think you should sleep, he said, cutting me out of my memories. There was no way in hell I was going to bed near this monster. I could see his eyes. He was not good. He was not innocent. He wasn't Jacob. My heart let out a disjointed beat. I wondered if Edward could hear it. Anger flashed briefly in his eyes and I flinched. Jake had told me about vampires. One touch, one snap of his hand and I was dead. One wrong move and I'd be done. I thought he was exaggerating. But not now, because the man before me was not human. He was a demon, a monster, straight from hell. It was amazing that I'd managed to stay alive this long. Maybe he planned to torture me. A slow death. It was exactly what I'd expect of these creatures. No thank you, I whispered, barely audible. Please, he whispered, tortured. I didn't know that dead eyes were capable of holding so much emotion. His eyes smoldered, almost hypnotized. I looked away. No, I ordered, louder again. He sighed, getting up from the chair he was in and walking from the room. I took a moment to look at my surroundings. I was in a dark room, almost homey, but I knew better. The bed I was lying upon was huge and luxurious, and the walls had pictures on them. The windows had bars and the blinds were shut. The door, I realized, was locked also. From the outside, I shuddered. A moment later the door opened, and he walked back in. I took a moment to study the creature in front of me. His hair was tousled, windblown, as if he'd stepped out into the storm. His eyes were a dull red now, almost brown. Almost. His cheekbones sat high on his breathtaking face, his nose strong and perfect. He had a full set of lips, so inviting. His jaw was prominent but subtle. He had the face of an angel. And he was the exact opposite. I looked down to his chest, illuminated by an informal button-up shirt and jeans. He was dressed as though he was human. All part of the facade. He was carrying what looked to be clothes in his hands, and the second I felt grateful I pushed the feeling back. Since you will not sleep, I've brought you some clean clothes. The bathroom is to your left. He pointed a stone-white finger towards a door, and you can wash up in there. If you need anything, well, I'm sure you won't. He smiled sheepishly, and walked out again. I let my mind wander to safer places, like Jacob and Charlie and Renee. If I ever got out of here, which I wouldn't, I was never going to be ungrateful again. It sent a chill through my bones at how quickly I would die now. I still had no idea why this creature had saved me. He was exactly like them. It hurt my head to even think about it, and I wished that he would just get it over with. I looked to the clothes he'd left me on the stand, and then to the door. A shower may clear my head. I picked up the clothes and walked into the elaborate bathroom. It had marble sinks and a tub with those jets in them, and a separate shower. It was fantastic, and I would have been impressed if this was not probably one of my last showers. There are no windows, I thought sarcastically. What a surprise. I showered slowly, taking time to let the water run down my body. I was hostage, plain and simple. I didn't know how long I had left, and I sure as hell wasn't going to anger him, Edward. I took a minute to wonder why God would create such a creature. It must have been an experiment gone terribly wrong. It also confused me as to why he was letting me live in such fantastic conditions. Shouldn't I be in a dungeon somewhere, huddling up in a dark corner? I stepped out of the shower, drying off and putting on the clean clothes. I ran my fingers through my hair, I couldn't find a brush, and stumbled out into the bedroom. I flopped on the bed, my mind swimming with confusion and terror, and I finally felt unconsciousness come. I didn't know if it was from hunger, or stress, or just plain fear, but the darkness finally consumed me, and took me deeper than I'd ever been. I knew I must have been sleeping for a very long time. My arms and legs ached, and my back was screaming in protest. I felt like I hadn't moved at all since I'd fallen asleep, except that now I was under the covers instead of on top of them. You've been asleep for a long time, he mused, and I jumped at the sound of his voice. I opened my eyes to see him sitting in the same chair as yesterday. The room looked different, and it took me a moment to realize that it was no longer dark outside. The sunlight shone behind the dark curtains, trying to come in. It wasn't getting very far. He smiled warmly at me, but I didn't react. Why are you keeping me here? I blurted out. He stared at me for a moment, calculating. I saved you, Bella. You should be thankful. His voice had a tint of annoyance. How do you know my name? I nearly growled. He frowned. I read James's thoughts. Of course I could have just read yours, but it seems I'm having some difficulty with that. He looked at me curiously. I wonder why that is. The way he was assessing me made me uncomfortable, and I pulled the bed sheet higher so it was covering more of me. You, I started, shocked. He read minds. Yes, he answered before I finished. I can read minds. I can read every mind. Apart from yours. Why is that? I asked, wondering. You tell me, he said, and his voice had a joking edge to it. I couldn't understand this. Jacob had told me these creatures killed mercilessly, and they had no emotions. Edward sure looked as though he had emotions, watching me with curious eyes that seemed to be getting less red and more yellow by the day. I shook my head, blushing slightly. I had no idea why. To answer your question, he said, clearing his throat, I'm keeping you because if I didn't, I'd have to kill you. A shudder ran down my spine at his seeming indifference. So you're not going to kill me now? I asked, shaking. He shook his head as though the idea was absurd. I will not hurt you, Isabella. Not unless you disobey me. James, the one I killed in the forest, he would have hurt you. I stared at him, shocked. So you killed the other one? Yes, he said, his voice uncaring and bored. I calculated for a moment. Not unless I disobey you. I repeated, dazed. If you try to escape me, which let me assure you, you will find no way out, but if you try to escape me, Bella Swan, I will not hesitate to kill you. I've put both of us in danger by letting you know what I am, and I'm not about to get in trouble with the law. Law, I whispered stupidly. Why would a vampire have to obey the laws of humans? It made no sense. The Volturi, if they ever found out what I'd let you see in the forest, he shook his head. They'd punish me. They'd kill me. I shivered again. Jacob had not known about a Volturi. I've made you some breakfast, he muttered, breaking me out of my reverie. It's just some bacon and eggs, you humans like that. It was a question. I nodded my head, taking in a whiff of the air. Delicious. My stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. He smiled, and suddenly he was beside me, holding the plate out to me. I flinched at his sudden proximity, but took the plate away from him with greedy fingers. I pushed the warm food down my dry throat, scarfing it down with vengeance. Edward watched me the entire time, frowning slightly. You are starving, he whispered, reaching out to me and snapping his hand back when I cringed, and it is my fault. I'm sorry, he hung his head. You must tell me the next time you get hungry. I won't hesitate. I want you to be comfortable. I scoffed, almost choking on the toast I was basically inhaling. I know this is cruel, but it's the only way. It is plain and simple. If I let you go, the Volturi will kill you slowly. And if you escape and I kill you before they get to you, I can make it painless. There is only one other way, he said madly, and that is to keep you with me. I wouldn't tell anyone, I whispered. I promise, if you just let me go. He slammed his fist down on the table, and I jumped, scooting farther away from him. They would kill you anyway, he growled. People cannot know about us. With that, he got up and walked out of the room. I didn't speak to him for a few hours after that. The next few days went by slowly, tortuously. And I knew that if this was how I was going to spend the rest of my life, I was going to have to ask him to kill me. He never really said much, just gave me the supplies I needed and walked away again. I'd always end up sleeping on top of the covers, and I'd always be under them in the morning. No doubt that was Edward's doing. He was taking care of me. And it felt nice. I never thought that I'd feel comfortable around a vampire, and I wasn't completely, but by the fourth day I was getting used to his presence. He would often sit in his chair reading as I watched the large TV, and sometimes I'd read a book as well. He had many. His patience was endless, and I guess that being immortal did that to you. In those 4 days I began studying him. The way he walked, the way his lips moved over his teeth as his smooth words flowed out. The way he would flick one piece of hair out of the way constantly, how he ran his fingers through his hair when he was nervous or uncomfortable. The way his eyebrows would lower over his eyes when he was frustrated, and his eyes were a honey color now. Not so intimidating now. He was beautiful, I'd realized with a jolt. He was absolutely gorgeous. Would you like to go for a walk? He asked on the 4th day, putting down his book. Wuthering Heights, I'd discovered. His question caught me off guard and I hesitated. A walk, he sighed. Yes, you know, like moving your legs outside. I thought I was hostage. I teased, and it amazed me how easily it came on. I should not be teasing with a creature of the devil. Oh, trust me, I could catch you if you ran. He was only joking, but I shivered anyway. Sure, I answered, willing to do anything to get out of the room. I'd love to. He'd blindfolded me before he opened the door, spinning me around a few times so that I had no idea which direction he was taking me. It was unnecessary, and he knew it, but he was being careful. I could find it nowhere in me to detest him for it. And that scared me. When I finally felt the cool winter air on my face, I shuddered, glad he'd instructed me on wearing the coat he'd brought me. The blindfold came off and I blinked a few times, trying to get used to the light. When my eyes adjusted, I looked around. We were on a cement pathway in what looked to be a garden. But I knew better. This was a maze. It felt amazing to have some fresh air though, and Edward walked beside me, matching me step for step. My father is probably looking for me, I muttered. I was perfectly comfortable with silence, but it was nice to hear his voice. I doubt it, Edward muttered. I looked over to him in shock. You don't know that. My father loves me and he's probably worried sick. How dare you? I growled. We both stopped walking, glowering at each other. Bella, it's been 4 days. After tomorrow, everyone will just assume you're dead. People go missing all the time. There was an emotion burning underneath his cool reserve, but I couldn't detect it. The tears came to my eyes and flowed down my cheeks miserably. This will absolutely kill my father, I whispered, choked by sobs. I got down on my knees in front of him, clutching at the ground. My mother, my father, my best friend, I trailed off. It will kill them, especially Jake. He'll know I'm not dead. He'll know the truth. He was on the ground now too, trying to get me to stand up. He wasn't using his vampire strength either, he was just trying to comfort. But something about the action was too human. Way too human to offer me any sort of comfort. What I felt now was rage. Blind, red-hot rage. Stop, I shrieked at him. Stop it now. I hate you. I hate you. You don't have a heart. You will never feel what it's like to love. I thrashed against him wildly, but he was too strong. Stop, Bella, honey, you'll hurt yourself. He wrapped his arms tightly around me. Stop, I shrieked again, the sobs cutting off my screaming. I let the breakdown come, not even caring if he was watching. My body shook with sobs of terror, pain, and most of all grief. He sat there all the time, gently rocking me back and forth as I caught my breath, and my body stopped shaking. He led me back to the house after I had calmed down, putting the blindfold back on. My room now seemed like a safe haven, and it made me feel better when I crawled back into the sheets and put my face in the pillow that smelled like me. More tears came, and I could feel his presence, but it didn't deter me. I just kept crying for Charlie, for Renee, for Jake and his pack of brothers. And sleep finally came. Geez, Jake, what's the matter? I asked, putting my hand on his arm. I could feel him shaking. Vampire, he spat out, sitting down on the log beside me. Our log, where? I asked as he put his large arm around me. It was so warm. It felt so nice. It's in the woods. It's male. It keeps trying to get past us for some reason. He shook his head in frustration. Just stay out of the woods, please, Bella. Promise me you won't go in the woods. His eyes bore into mine. I promise, Jake, I answered, taking his hand. So much for best friend. I'll go spend the day with Emily or something. Thanks, Bells, he said, getting up. Where are you going? I asked, miffed. He'd just gotten here. I've gotta go. He grinned. You have to go. He smiled. Yeah, I've got a vampire to kill. He smirked at me, leaning down to give me a quick kiss on the cheek. Then he ran down the beach until he disappeared in the line of woods. I put my hand on the spot where he'd kissed me. It felt warm. It felt like Jacob. Bella, wake up. I squeezed my eyes more tightly shut. This was not the voice I wanted to hear. Bella, he said firmly, shaking my shoulder. These fingers were not warm. They were ice cold, freezing. I didn't respond. Bella, he said loudly, and I pushed back my eyelids. I was no longer in my dream. No, I was back in the prison with the devil. I felt like I'd start crying again. He was looking at me wearily, like I was going to break down again. I'm fine, I muttered defensively. He shook his head in understanding, standing up. I'm going to let you come out of your room now, Bella. You can explore the house if you wish. He said this quietly. I was confused. I thought I couldn't go. There's no way out, so don't even try. He muttered, watching me. I'm being very generous here, Isabella. I watched him warily. You're not kidding. He shook his head sadly. You must be going mad in this room. You shouldn't have to stay in here. Go ahead. He nodded toward the already open door. Is this a trick? A trace of anger crossed his expression. No, Isabella. I stood up, testing. I walked toward the door stiffly. My legs ached like crazy. I put my hand on the door handle, opening it up further. Edward watched me the whole time, smiling softly. You can call me Bella, I said, turning around slightly. What? He sounded like I'd pulled him from another train of thought. Call me Bella, I said again, smiling lightly. A slow grin stretched across his face and he laughed. Bella, what is your last name, Edward? I asked, realizing I had no idea. My full name is Edward Anthony Masson Cullen. He answered. That's a mouthful. I chuckled. What's your full name, Bella? My name is Isabella Marie Swan, I said, and he smiled. He walked closer, putting his hand on my waist. I would have flinched, but I could tell he wouldn't hurt me. He led me out into the hallway, which was just as elaborately decorated as my room. I had a feeling that the whole house was this way. It's beautiful, I muttered. He smiled. It's my mother and father's. He explained when I looked at him in shock. My adopted mother and father. He gave this house to her as a gift. One of his many gifts to her. I wasn't expecting that. Are they vampires too? I asked softly. Yes. I have 4 brothers and sisters too. The shock returned. Wow. I muttered. What? He asked as we walked down the hallway and came to a flight of stairs. We began walking down them. I didn't know that vampires could live with each other. I mean, Jake always said that they had too big of tempers, that they ended up fighting or killing each other. Jake? He asked curiously. I smiled. Jake is my best friend. He's sort of a werewolf. I'd never told anyone else that, but Edward wasn't a human, and who was my biggest alliance to anyway. Edward's eyes opened wider. That would explain the smell. He trailed off. What smell? He ignored my question and moved on. And Jake was right. Most vampires would kill each other if they had to live together. That's why most vampires are nomads. But my family, he hesitated. We're not like most vampires. We don't drink human blood. We drink the blood of animals. We were at the bottom of the stairs now, and I turned to look at him. I saw your eyes. They were red. You killed a person. I called him out on his lie. He hung his head. I did not mean to drink the human's blood. I didn't check the trail. I was already in my hunting set of mind. He was too close. Edward winced, his mind far away in thought. He looked back to me. It was a horrid accident. I hate myself for it. But that's when I heard James's thoughts. His face turned into a furious scowl. He was so happy he'd found you. So happy he could feed on someone who smelled so mouthwatering. He was growling now. That's why I had to stop him. Because a few minutes before that, I had been the monster. I couldn't let him live. A young girl like you. I had to save you. He shook his head, trying to clear the memory. I stood staring at him for a moment, not knowing what to say. Thank you, I whispered, putting my hand on his cheek. He was the one to flinch this time, but he didn't pull back. For saving me. I kept my hand on his cold cheek, and after a few moments he put his hand over mine. He smiled lightly. Thank you for understanding, he whispered. We stared at each other for a long moment, and I felt something growing in me. Well, not just in me, but in my heart. It took me a moment to see, staring into this creature's eyes, that he was more human than I ever could have imagined. He was trapped in this life, this hell, and he probably didn't even choose it for himself. He'd just told me that he drinks animal blood. That doesn't make him a killer. Well, apart from the one man, it almost makes him a human that's immortal. I felt pity for this creature. Definitely that, but more than anything at all, I didn't hate him anymore. The realization nearly knocked me to the ground, nearly made me stop breathing. I shouldn't be here, shouldn't be caring for this monster. And yet, looking into his eyes, I can't find the sensible girl I'd once been. I can't find the girl who had promised Jacob she wouldn't go in the woods, who had promised Charlie she would stay safe, never ride on motorcycles, and not date any guys until she was 30. Bella, Edward whispered, stroking my hair back from my face. I leaned into his cool touch, not at all apprehensive about him touching me. He would not hurt me. I knew that now. Edward, I said quietly, almost cooing. He was the one to look away first, sighing and taking his hand off of my cheek. I took mine off when he did, a little annoyed that he had ruined whatever moment we'd been having. He put his hand on my lower back like he did earlier, leading me down into what I assumed was the living room. It seemed more modern than everything else, and there was a huge flat-screen TV on an even bigger entertainment stand. This was definitely not a house I'd expect from vampires. The living room. Edward sighed, gesturing to the room. I can see that, I smirked, looking over at him. There was an odd tension between us now, something I'd never felt around him before. It confused me. We walked into a room just off of the living room and stepped into the kitchen. It too was more modern than not, and it had stainless steel appliances. These vampires must have been rich. Wow, I said, looking around. He smiled. Esme is an amazing decorator. My sister Rosalie and her love to do all that designing stuff. He smiled indulgently. You love them, I stated, not a question. I really do, he said, and his voice had a very adoring edge to it. They'd forgive me for anything. I can do no wrong in their eyes. He shook his head. Isn't that what families do? I said, thinking about Renee and Charlie. They were always on my side, even when I was wrong. I guess so, he mumbled, averting his eyes. There was a moment of silence before he looked back to me. Do you want to see the rest of the house? He led me through room after room, each one of them as beautiful as the last. It was around noon by the time we finished, and my stomach let out a small growl. You're hungry, Edward sighed, and a few wrinkles came onto his forehead. Yeah, I put my hand on my stomach as he led the way toward the kitchen. What would you like? He asked, rummaging around in the cupboards. I was at a loss for a moment. What do you have? He sighed. We have sandwiches. Sure, give me a sandwich, I said, trying to appease his frustration. Sorry, he murmured. I'm just not used to having a human around here. I have no idea what you eat. It's fine, I said, sitting down at one of the stools at the island in the middle of the kitchen. I watched as he assembled the sandwich. How old are you, Edward? I asked. He tensed. Then he sighed. I'm 17. I sighed loudly. And how long have you been 17? He tensed again. A while, he answered. I nodded my head, assuming as much. I spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the house by myself. Edward claimed he was going to go eat, and I didn't have to ask to know he was going to hunt. It made me shudder, but I could not detest him if it was an animal that he killed. He got back later in the evening, and by that time I had settled onto the couch. I was watching a Friends rerun when he came in. His eyes were golden now, beautiful. It amazed me how I'd gone from thinking this man was a devil to thinking he was beautiful in 5 days. He walked slowly towards me, as if not to startle me. I smiled timidly in response as he sat on the couch next to me. How was your trip? I asked, unsure of what to say. He smirked. Well, I'm feeling better, if that's what you mean. I shivered, but not from the cold. He gave me a worried look. I'm sorry. If you don't want me to talk about it, just say so. I don't want to make you uncomfortable. Thanks, I said, nodding my head. You have to understand how confusing and scary this is for me. A touch of sadness reached his eyes. Sorry for that. I really wish that I could just let you go, but you have to understand my side. I do. I sighed heavily. He smiled lightly, leaning back into the couch. What are you watching? He asked curiously. I chuckled. It's called Friends. It's good. He turned his attention to the TV, even giggling at Joey's stupid but hilarious lines. I'd never seen him look more human, or more beautiful. A memory of Jacob's voice came into my mind then for some reason. Vampires are dangerous. They may look appealing on the outside. They're beautiful, but never forget that these creatures wouldn't think twice before ripping you to shreds. My heart ached at the memory of his voice. Jacob, my Jacob, are you okay? Edward asked, his voice sounding worried. It was only then that I realized he was staring at me, taking in my pained expression. I could feel the tears that had pooled on my cheeks. I wiped them stupidly. "I'm fine," I lied. He looked at me sympathetically. "Bella, what's wrong?" "I'm just thinking about Jake," I trailed off. An unknown emotion presented itself in his eyes. Before I could recognize it, though, he was composed again. "I take it you and this Jacob were close." He averted his eyes to the TV, indifferent. "Yeah, he was my best friend. I love him," I whispered, feeling fresh tears spill down my cheeks. Edward looked over to me suddenly, pained. "I'm so sorry, Isabella." I chuckled. "I thought I told you to call me Bella." He smiled a little, but it didn't reach his eyes. We watched TV a little more, just sitting around. Never in a million years did I think I'd be so comfortable around him. He sat as still as stone, like an unknown sculpture devoted to some god of beauty. He was glorious. Once in a while he'd catch me staring, and he'd take the hand out of his lap and scoot it closer to me. I didn't flinch so as not to hurt his feelings, or maybe it was because I didn't want to move. I smiled at the hand, and he smiled at me, seeming to like the fact that I like him being close to me. Our eyes met, and the tension between us flared back up again. I felt the urge to scoot away, but I couldn't. I was locked there. I didn't move as he inched closer to me, like two magnets that were trying to connect. When he was close enough to touch, he reached his hand out to mine. I took it slowly, shivering at his cold touch. It felt so hard. It felt so cold. It felt so Edward. It felt amazing. 10 times better than Jacob's. I shuddered in pleasure. "If I told you I loved you, Bella, would you let me keep you forever?" He whispered, sending shivers down my spine. "You can keep me as long as you want, Edward." I whispered back, shocking myself at how true the statement was. I wasn't even really a prisoner anymore. It didn't feel that way at least. As we inched closer, inch by agonizing inch, I realized that I could never hate this creature. No, not when I loved him so much. I wish that I could say it hit me like wrecking ball, like one moment I was here and the next I was in his heart. But it wasn't like that at all. It was a growing fancy. It was not strong yet, but it soon would be. I could feel it. I liked Edward for sure. And right now, that was enough. We connected our lips slowly, me because I didn't want him to have to be in pain, him because he was testing how far he could go before my life ended. And it should have scared me. But it didn't. His lips were hard and cold, not at all the way I always imagined Jake's would be. Jake was warm, always. Not just because he ran at 108 degrees, but because that was just Jake. He was my own personal sun. Always warm. "I'm freezing," I whispered, wrapping my arms tightly around my torso and shivering. Jake grinned. 108 degrees over here, Bells." I laughed, scooting over so my body was touching his. I put my head on his shoulder, leaning my face into his neck. "God," I breathed. The warmth felt like heaven. So warm. He chuckled, the vibrations against his neck tickling my skin. "It's a werewolf thing," he muttered, wrapping his arm around my shoulders. "No," I whispered, "it's a Jacob thing." But with Edward it was different. He could be warm, when he wanted to be. Jake was wrong about vampires on that account. I knew by spending these 5 days with Edward that he had emotions. Strong emotions. He was not completely made of stone. I continued moving my lips with his softly, just enjoying the feeling and the sparks flying through the air. After about a minute he pulled back. "Bella," he whispered, stroking my hair. "Edward," I sighed, reaching my hands up to run my fingers through his hair. He pulled away, but took my hand instead, tracing circles on my palm. "I've never felt this way before," he murmured. "If my brother Emmett found out what was happening I'd never hear the end of it." "What is happening here?" I wondered, smirking. He laughed. "I have no idea." He reached his hand up to stroke my cheek. "But I think I like it." I seriously needed to sit back and take stock of what had just happened. I was sitting alone in my room again. Edward had decided to give me some privacy. Now that he wasn't here I was beginning to realize what I'd just allowed to happen. I'd just kissed a vampire. A hostile, devilish, brooding, plotting, beautiful, wonderful, protective, amazing, caring, loving vampire. Oh God, what had I gotten myself into? Jacob Black had been my best friend since I'd moved to Forks. We'd clicked instantly, and I could always see myself with a future with him. When he became a werewolf it had complicated things, but in the end it had only brought us closer. I felt as though I had some alliance to him, some promise that couldn't be broken. But now all shreds of what we had was gone. I wasn't getting out of here. Wasn't going anywhere. There was no way that we could be together anymore. And now Edward was here. It almost pained me that I had broken my ties with Jake and started liking Edward so quickly. I sat and pondered what I wanted for a moment. I mean, what I really wanted. Only one face came to my mind. A face with beautiful bronze hair and honey gold eyes. The door creaked as I heard it open. "Bella," he said, walking the rest of the way in. He looked wary. I smiled tentatively at him, gesturing for him to come sit next to me on the bed. His face took on a bit of relief as he walked over to me with human speed. "You look frustrated," he whispered. "Is something the matter?" He took my hand and I held back my aversion to his cold skin. He touched the crease between my eyebrows. "I just don't understand how I can sit here. After all I've been told, all I've been taught. And yet, here I am, completely content in holding your hand." His fingers brushed across my cheek. "I've never been one to enjoy the kill," he whispered, looking away. "I always hated what I am. I've never enjoyed slaughtering innocent creatures to get what I need." He looked back to me. "But I've never met anyone like you, Isabella. I've walked around for years, you have no idea how long, thinking I was complete in myself. Until I met you. That day I found in you in the woods, the moment I looked into your eyes I knew I had to keep you. I knew that I had to make myself strong enough to be good for you. And even now, even when I know I'm not good enough for you, I couldn't stop myself from trying to keep you for myself." I stared at him for a moment, not understanding. "What are you saying?" I whispered. "It wasn't just the need to save someone from that vile creature." His voice got a little tense until he calmed himself. "It was the need to save you." I saw you in his mind, your beautiful brown eyes alert and focused with words so beautiful I couldn't. He was unable to finish. I stroked his cheek lightly. "You scared the hell out of me. I thought you were going to hurt me, then I wake up here." I looked around, and I have to admit that I was scared to death. "Of me," he said simply. I nodded sheepishly. "Until I learned about you." He looked up at me through his long lashes, smiling lightly, friendly. "I've never met anyone quite like you, Isabella Swan." I smiled, moving my face a little closer to his. He smirked, knowing exactly what I was looking for. I mewed lightly as we connected our lips, the sparks in the air crackling and popping as our lips moved together. We both pulled away, gasping. We put our foreheads together, staring each other straight in the eyes. And I could see his soul. And I really liked what I saw in that moment. "You're killing me, Bella," he mumbled, pulling me tightly to his chest. "I've never met anyone so tempting, so beautiful," he trailed off, nuzzling his cool cheek to my neck. I sighed contentedly, but stiffened as he began sniffing my neck, my pulse point. My breathing accelerated and my palms began to sweat. No doubt he could feel that now, our fingers entwined. "Ho basano di te," he whispered, and my brow furrowed. I recognized the language as Italian, but I had no idea what he said. He smiled against my neck, bringing his face back up to eye level. "It means, I need you." I blushed, looking down. "In what way, exactly?" He stiffened against me, and my body was suddenly jerked away. I looked up, confused, to find that he was on the other side of the room, breathing heavily. His hands were clenched at his sides, his face a mixture of anger and lust. I shuddered. "I'm sorry," he sighed suddenly, his posture relaxing. He walked over to me slowly, so as not to startle me. I was still a little shocked, not sure what just happened. He smiled at me sheepishly, a little ashamed. "I'm sorry I did that," he murmured, "but you have no idea how tempting you are. And to answer your question earlier, I need you in every single way possible." "I don't understand," I whispered as he took my hand gently, drawing patterns over my pale skin. "Did I do something wrong?" He sighed. "No, Bella, you've done nothing wrong. It's me. I have no right to have you, and yet here you are. And you have no idea how much I care for you. Sono anni che ti stavo cercando, se la mia anima gemella, senza di te la mia vita non ha senso, ti tu sei quello a che stavo aspettando." I shook my head, Something about Edward speaking Italian brought up a heat deep down inside of me, something I've never felt before. It was odd, but not exactly bad, just different. I never felt this with Jake, and it took me a few seconds to realize that I was turned on. I blushed. "You have no idea what I just said," he stated, amused. I smirked at him. If only he knew what I was thinking. I wondered what he'd do if I told him I blushed again. "Bella," he whispered, stroking my cheek. "What?" I asked self-consciously, suddenly afraid he could read my mind. I was speaking Italian again. He murmured softly, "Now that one I knew." Bella was Italian for beautiful. I looked over at him in wonder. "You think I'm beautiful?" I whispered, my throat closing a little. People had always told me I was pretty, and I'd failed to believe them. Only one person had I ever told me I was beautiful before, and that was my mother. Not exactly something I'd taken to heart. But for some reason hearing Edward say it made my insides feel mushy. He stared me straight in the eyes, no sign of wavering or untruth in his velvet voice. "I think, Isabella, that you are the most beautiful creature I have ever had the pleasure of laying my eyes upon." We both beamed at each other for a moment, and I let my heart grow lightly. He pulled me close to him again, wrapping his strong arms around my soft frame. "I love you, my Bella. My bellissima girl." Hearing the words, "I love you," come out of Edward's mouth directed at me was more than a little shocking, but I was ecstatic anyway. And in that moment I knew why I was here. I knew that I wanted to be here. And I knew that I didn't want to leave for a long, long time. He strolled into the room, his expression calculating as he sat next to me on the bed. I put down my book, turning to him. "Is something the matter?" He smiled lightly, leaning over to run a finger along my cheek. Then he put his hands in his lap, looking down at them. "My family has decided to come," he murmured, and he looked over to me so quickly, then back, that I wasn't sure he'd even done it. "They're going to stay here for a while with us." I felt a familiar feeling creep into my stomach, a coil that told me to be afraid. "A house full of vampires." I shook my head. "Vegetarian vampires. Won't hurt me." My breathing quickened nonetheless, but from nerves more than anything. "What if they don't like me?" I asked in a small voice. He stared at me for a few moments, and then he burst into fits of laughter. "You're going to be in a house full of vampires, and you're afraid they won't like you." He chortled. I smacked him lightly on the arm without thinking about it, and my hand froze as my entire body stiffened. He noticed, his eyes suddenly filling with worry. "What's wrong, Bella?" I looked down to the hand that was still on his arm, then back at his angel's face. I was surprised to see that there was no anger in his expression, just complete and total adoration. It made me dizzy. He took the hand in his own, bringing it to his lips and kissing it. I blushed bright red, feeling the heat spread through my body. He smiled at my reaction, the obvious frantic beating of my heart. "Do you like that?" he murmured, bringing it to his lips and kissing the center of my palm, then to my wrist, up to my elbow, and finally right to my neck. I shut my eyes, letting a light moan escape my lips as I felt his cool lips at my pulse point. I was too distracted to even be scared, my reaction to his body overpowering everything else. When he pulled away, smirking, I whimpered. I opened my lids to find that his eyes were a dark gold, almost black. I shivered at what I saw there. He was hungry, only not in the vampire way, not even in the human way. He was hungry for me. I saw the lust in his eyes for a few brief seconds before he controlled his expression, jumping off the bed and strolling to the door. "You may want to get dressed," he said, his words half strangled. "They'll be here around noon." When I first met the rest of Edward's family, it shocked me at how amazingly gorgeous they all were. They looked like a family, what with their similar eyes and skin color. However, I realized after studying them more, they were all completely different. Alice, Edward's youngest sister, was apparently psychic. In fact, the second her petite, yet still amazingly proportioned body bounced through the door, I was met with a cheery, "Hey Bella. I already know we're going to be such great friends." I liked Alice immediately, it was hard not to, and I found myself smiling as Edward ruffled her short black hair. "Give her some room to breathe, Alice," Edward warned gently, his voice full of amusement and adoration for his little sister. Jasper, Alice's fiancé, was just as interesting as his mate. Jasper controlled moods, something I experienced firsthand as I felt a flood of calm rush over my body the second Alice pulled him over to me. He had blonde hair, which left an odd contrast to his darker features, but it somehow made his demeanor more endearing. He was very laid back, and I heard the trace of the southern accent. Jasper was the newest vampire, the last one to enter the Cullen family. He had a harder time controlling himself, so he kept his distance. I tried not to think about that too much. Rosalie, Jasper's twin sister, well, at least that's what they told everyone, was possibly the most beautiful person I'd ever seen. Her long, wavy blonde hair fell down to her lower back, and her body was the exact kind of thing you'd see on the cover of GQ magazine. Her face was strikingly beautiful, every feature perfect. She seemed to know how pretty she was, standing with a posture that just screamed confidence. I tried not to be too hard on myself as I took a hit on my self-esteem just by being in the same room. Emmett, who was Rosalie's boyfriend, was, in one word, huge. He looked like a bodybuilder, someone who constantly goes to the gym to have muscles on his muscles. Just like the other ones, he was beautiful in the extreme, his dark hair shaved down. He seemed to be the goofball of the family, immediately after walking through the door screaming at the top of his lungs, "Honey, I'm home." He was intimidating in a different kind of way than Rosalie, and as he swatted my hand away so he could take me up into his arms for a bone-crushing hug, I couldn't figure out if I was more scared of Rosalie or him. All of them so different, and yet still so similar. Carlisle and Esme, Edward's parents, were the ones I was most nervous about meeting. "It's so wonderful to finally meet you, Isabella," Esme said, lightly pulling me into a motherly embrace. It was painful like Emmett's, but more maternal. It made me miss my mom. Carlisle was more formal. "Nice to meet you, Bella," he said kindly, shaking my hand. Edward had one arm over my shoulder the entire time, and it seemed he was trying to make me feel more comfortable. It felt nice, knowing he was right there. "Dinner time?" Edward asked me suddenly, and every pair of eyes in the room turned to me. I blushed, not comfortable with the sudden turn of conversation. Edward could see the panic in my eyes, and he quickly corrected himself. "Shall I rephrase?" he asked, giving me a quick peck on the cheek. "Are you hungry, Bella?" Everyone began laughing, and I let a nervous chuckle escape my lips. Not at the moment." I lied, but I didn't want to be rude and eat in front of everyone. Edward nodded his head, but I could see that in his eyes he knew what I was doing. Carlisle put one hand on Edward's shoulder, saying, "You were very strong, my son. I'm proud of you." Edward hung his hand as if ashamed. "I'm sorry for the man," Carlisle interrupted. "The past is the past. We can't do anything about that now." Edward nodded his head reluctantly. Carlisle turned to me. "So, Bella, Edward here tells me you are friends with a werewolf." I winced. "Jake," I muttered, my stomach giving a strange pull. Carlisle nodded. "I figured they'd be around since James and Victoria had come back. The names weren't familiar to me, so I figured they must have been vampires." I nodded my head slowly. "Yeah, I was with Jake before he started acting odd." I trailed off, not sure of what to say. Everyone seemed to be focused on me at the moment, and I couldn't help the blush that colored my cheeks as I looked at the ground. There was a moment of silence, and I guessed that no one knew what to say. Then Esme directed her attention to Edward, putting her hand on his arm. "How are you, dear?" Her genuine concern made me feel like I wanted to cry for some reason. He smiled sadly. "I'm dealing." They all watched in shock as Edward put his arm around my shoulders. There was a beat of silence and then I heard Alice squeal. "Oh my God, Edward," she exclaimed, her voice making me wince. Edward stared at nothing in general, but then he winced. I felt him pull me closer absent-mindedly. Emmett groaned. "Can someone please explain to me what the hell just happened? I hate it when you two do this." Edward looked to Alice, astonishment and wonder on his face. "Alice, how?" "I don't know, but it's so real. It's gonna happen." "Oh my gosh, Bella." She ran over to me, pulling me from Edward's grasp. "We're gonna be sisters." I looked to Edward, confused. He shrugged, patting Alice on the head. "I can read Alice's mind when she has a vision," he explained. I chuckled now, understanding Emmett's reaction. "Wait," Esme said, walking closer. You mean, yes, Edward answered curtly. His eyes were suddenly annoyed, his body tense. What was it about? I asked, looking to Alice. Edward grabbed me, twirling me out of the room. It's nothing, he murmured when we were alone, averting his gaze. Absolutely nothing. It wasn't until about a week after the Cullens had moved in that I realized the reality of my situation. I was in a house full of 7 vampires. 7 amazingly beautiful vampires. Damn it, I knew my family thought I was dead. They probably stopped looking for me by now. The thought made me weep. That's why, when Edward claimed he'd gone to speak to Alice about something important, I'd curled into a ball on the bathroom floor, and began sobbing. I let the sobs rack my body as I clutched at my sides, letting the tears run out. I barely noticed the stone-cold arms wrapping around me, gently rubbing my back in soothing circles. I was far beyond caring. I didn't want Edward to see me like this, didn't want anyone to see me like this, so I tried to get away. But they just tightened their grip. Let go, I said, the tears choking me. No, the voice wasn't Edward's, and it made me jump. I looked up to see Rosalie, her eyes filled with reserve but compassion. She smiled meekly at me. You looked like you needed a hug, she said honestly, opening her arms wider so she could hug me tighter. I continued to sob, not really caring anymore. She rocked me back and forth gently, patting my back. When I finally got a grip on myself, I sat up and she let me go. We sat awkwardly for a few moments before she spoke. I never got a chance to tell you my story, she murmured, her eyes far away. I shook my head, rubbing my eyes. She took that as an incentive to continue. It was so long ago. I had fresh tears in my eyes by the time she was done, and she looked like she'd be crying if she could as well. That's terrible, I whispered, giving her a sympathetic smile. She nodded, wrapping her arms around her knees. I got a happy ending, though. I love Emmett more than anything. But with you, she trailed off, but she didn't have to finish. My father is probably going crazy, I said, shaking my head and willing myself to hold it together. And my best friend, Jake. She took my hand. This will all work out. I promise. It's just, Edward is very stubborn it seems. I nodded in understanding. Because of the Volturi, she nodded, but I heard the false note in her voice. Yes, but it'll be okay. I just know it will. There was a secret in her eyes, something I thought I should know, but I didn't press for anything. I jumped when I heard a knock at the door. I wondered why she hadn't been startled, then I understood she'd probably heard Edward coming from the second he stepped out of Alice's room. What's going on? He said, his voice suspicious. He was shooting a very obvious stare at Rosalie, wondering what she was doing in here. He looked to me. Bella, what's wrong? He kneeled down next to me, wiping his hands under my eyes. I must have still been crying. What did you do? He said angrily at Rose. I put my hand up to stop him. She didn't do anything. We talked. He looked to Rose, who was smirking at him, and debated whether or not to believe me. Honestly, I added, pushing his shoulder down so he'd back off. She helped me. With what? Edward asked, that accusing tone still in his voice. I helped her with what you're too stupid to see, Rosalie said, getting up off the bathroom floor. She smoothed down her clothes. She needs to go back to her family, Edward. I was completely surprised by her answer, but I seemed to be frozen on the floor. Edward made a growling sound in his throat. Mind your own business, Rose. Edward had gotten up as well now, and they stood glaring at each other. She misses them. Can't you see that? Would you stop being so selfish and think of the consequences for once? Do you really want her like this? Do you want her to be damned to this just like the rest of us are? And think about her family, Edward. Can you imagine how hard they're going to look for her, how heartbroken they are? And what about her mutt friend? What if the dog catches on? Jesus, you're so stupid sometimes. Edward clenched his teeth. She doesn't have to become like this. Alice's visions change. What? My voice was so unexpected and high-pitched Edward and Rosalie both jumped. Edward looked at me for a moment, confused. I felt like I was drowning. Alice had a vision. Of me. Be becoming like you. I asked, my voice barely audible. Understand slowly filtered over Edward's face, and suddenly everything went blurry. I barely heard Rose, sitting next to me, shaking me, calling my name. Everything was suddenly very clear. Edward wouldn't kill me. Edward would turn me into a vampire. Just like him and his family. The thought made my stomach churn. Rosé, what do we do? Go get Carlyle, please. Edward's voice, the only thing that was clear during my little blackout. I slowly opened my eyes. Two very worried gold ones were staring back at me. Oh, God, Bella. He said, taking my face in his hands. Are you okay? I registered the fact that Edward was touching me, and that it made me feel all better for a moment. Then I registered that I should be scared. Get your hands off me. I said slowly, unsurely. Hurt displayed across his face for a moment, but he didn't release me. Edward, now, I growled, louder this time. He slowly took his fingers away from my cheeks, looking like he'd just been kicked. I stood up, leaving him on the bathroom floor as I sprinted out of the room. I didn't think about the other vampires in the house, didn't think of how fast they could catch me and how easily I'd be dead after that. Edward had said I wasn't allowed to escape. My adrenaline was the only thing that kept me going all the way to the front door. But two very cold hands stopped me from opening it. No, Isabella. His voice was cold now, dripping with anger. There was none of the former nice Edward that I'd come to know. He was acting like what he was now. A monster. The tears came into my eyes without me willingly allowing them to. This was Edward, my Edward, but I couldn't do this. I couldn't become a monster. Who was my biggest alliance to anyway? Edward or Jake? My head swam from exhaustion and betrayal, and I turned around to face him. Please, I whispered, tears streaming from my eyes and onto my cheeks. Please just let me go. His eyes became mocking and he came closer to me, all the while pushing me back against the wall. As you wish, Isabella. He muttered, and I flinched as his hand came up, taking hold of my skull and slamming it back against the wall. I caught a glimpse of his beautiful golden eyes, and that's the last thing I remember before the blackness consumed me. Numb. All I could hear was beeping. Annoying beeping. If this was heaven, why was I so annoyed? Did that mean I was in hell? I winced, realizing that the harder I thought, the more my head hurt. I'd hit that sucker pretty hard. How? I didn't remember anything. I know I hit my head but only because it hurts. How did I hurt my head? I fought to open my eyes, but found I couldn't. I jumped when I heard a voice. How is she? Jacob. My Jacob. Jake. 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 He was here. I fought harder to open my eyes. She's coming. Another familiar voice. Charlie. It was only then that I realized large hands were holding one of my own. The other felt weighed down. Almost as if it was attached to something. Do you think she'll be okay? Jake asked, and his voice cracked. I felt Charlie lean down to kiss my hand. Doctor says she'll be fine once she wakes up, he trailed off. Jake let out a small sob. If she wakes up. Oh, God, this was so frustrating. Why couldn't I open my eyes? Why couldn't I talk? Most importantly, why the hell was I in here? Dad, I tried to say. It felt as though my lips were moving, but no sound came out. Dad, I tried harder. Bella, Charlie whispered. Jake, go get the doctor. His voice was frantic and it made me want to cry. Dad, I said, and coughed. It felt like I hadn't spoken in months. Oh, Bella, Charlie said, his voice thick with tears. I finally found control of my body slowly, and I allowed myself to open my eyes a little. Ouch. I shut them quickly, the light burning after having not opened them for so long. I heard footsteps, then another man's voice. Dim the lights, he ordered someone, I had no idea who. The footsteps got closer and I felt Charlie's hand squeeze mine firmly. You can open your eyes, Isabella. The man whispered, and I felt his fingers at my wrist, checking my pulse. I opened my eyes again, wincing because it still hurt a little. Bells. Charlie and Jake both exclaimed at the same time. I tried to find their faces, but I couldn't. Black spots clouded my vision and I cleared my throat. Dad, Jake, I croaked, sputtering when the words burned my throat. We're here, Charlie whispered from somewhere to my left. I tried to turn my head towards his voice and winced. Ow, I whispered. Someone, the doctor, I assumed, chuckled. Easy there, that must be tender. Oh, God, I croaked, my voice thick. I cleared it again and winced. It felt like flames. I finally focused in on a face. It was the doctor. He smiled at me warmly. We're so glad you've finally woken, Isabella. You've got a waiting room full of people out there. I winced again, but not because of the pain. Bells, I heard, and Jake came into my line of vision. Jake, I quietly exclaimed, smiling as he leaned down to envelop me in a very warm hug. It felt so nice that I sighed. But something felt wrong about the hug. Something I didn't understand at all. I shrugged it off. You scared the hell out of us, Bells. He whispered, kissing my cheek. I broke into tears when I saw both of their faces again. Charlie was the next one for a hug. Don't you ever do that to me again, Bella. He said firmly, but the relief was evident in his voice. They helped me sit up, and I examined the room. I was in a hospital, that was for sure, and the room was off-white, with lots of machines all around me. All of them seemed to be hooked to me, actually. What happened? I whispered, wiping the tears from my eyes. You went into the woods and didn't come back out, Bella. Charlie answered, squeezing my hand tightly. I winced. I don't remember anything, I said, looking to the doctor for an explanation. He shrugged. You must have hit your head and gotten a concussion. I nodded my head. But how? Did I fall and hit my head on a rock? Yeah, that must have been it. How did you find me? I asked. We had search parties, we looked for days and there was no trace. Jake's voice broke off in agony. Seth found you up by the mountain, Bells. Jacob gave me a very pointed look and I nodded my head. Seth must have found me when he was a wolf form, then. I nodded my head. Isabella Marie Swan. Charlie said, you will never do that to me again. He put his head in his hands. And by the way, you're grounded for the rest of your life. I smiled weakly. I understand. And I promise I won't go into the woods again. By the third day I was confused as hell, and I couldn't just drop it. I was still in the hospital, and everyone was making sure I was fine. My mother had flown to Forks a few days after I'd gone missing, and the reunion with her had been a tearful and joy-filled one. But I still couldn't get my mind away from how I ended up like this. I knew I didn't just get lost in the woods. I'd explored them so many times with Jake that I knew them like the back of my hand. Jake knew that too, but he stayed quiet. I didn't get lost in the woods, Jake. I know I didn't, I said one evening after Charlie had gone to grab some dinner. I don't know what else to tell you, Bells. He muttered, stroking my hand with his thumb. There's no other explanation. I'd shaken my head, trying to wrap my head around things. It was going to kill me. And at the same time, I couldn't help but wonder why remembering was so important to me. Why couldn't I just accept the fact that I'd gotten lost, fallen down and smacked my head off a rock or fallen tree? That was exactly what someone as clumsy as me would do. But something tugged at my memory. Something strong. Something trying to break free. Golden eyes. That's the only thing that came to me. Why the hell was I seeing those eyes every single time I closed my eyes? Maybe they were God's eyes. Maybe an angel had visited me while I lay in the forest waiting. No. By the fourth day I was going out of my mind. Well, Bella, your numbers look good. I jumped at Dr. John's voice. I didn't even know he was in here. Seems as though you can go home later today. Your father will have to fill our paperwork but then you'll be free to leave. I smiled at this. Of course you'll have to take it easy for a few weeks. Build up your strength. No school, understood. I nodded my head. That's a good girl. He smiled, walking out. My mother kissed my cheek. Thank God, Bella. This is great. I'm staying with you until you get better. I guess I can crash on the couch. I'm going to have to call Phil. I barely caught all of her words, for my mind kept wandering. I fought to keep myself on the present and away from those eyes. Seeing my old familiar room was a shock to me, and I broke down into tears. My mother held me the whole time, promising I'd be okay. It didn't feel that way. These violent delights have violent ends. And in their triumph die. Like fire and powder, which, as they kiss, consume. Time passes. Even when it seems impossible. Even when each tick of the second hand of the clock aches like the pulse behind a bruise, which I have many of now. It passes unevenly, in strange lurches and dragging lulls, but pass it does. Even for me. October. November. December. January, February, Jake's fist slammed down on the table and I jumped, as did my bowl of chicken soup. Do you have to be so damn dramatic? I asked, getting up and putting it in the sink. He got up and walked over to me. I flinched as his warm fingers gripped my face. You're going to Jacksonville, to your mother, he whispered, pained. I hate seeing you like this, Bells. I know it's been tough getting back into the swing of things after what happened, but you have to let this go. I'm not leaving, I answered dully. Anger flashed in his expression. Jacob had been my one and only savior those first couple of months. But he couldn't even keep my mind at ease. I was constantly jumpy, constantly in a foul mood. He deserved better. Maybe you need professional help, Bella. He whispered. You mean like a shrink? I exclaimed, anger building up in me. I wasn't crazy. I knew I wasn't. Bella, you're scaring the hell out of Charlie, and me for that matter. I think you need some diversion. Just go to Jacksonville, get your mind off things, have fun. Talk to your mom, do girl stuff. His brow wrinkled. Please, Bells, for Charlie, for me. I sighed, hating the situation he was putting me in. We were both silent for a few moments. Fine, I whispered. I'll go. If I told you I loved you, Bella, would you let me keep you forever? He whispered, his cool breath fanning against my cheek. You can keep me as long as you want. I whispered, clinging to him with tenacious fingers. Why don't you remember me? He sighed, his voice pained. I looked into his golden eyes, the only things visible. The rest of his face was in the darkness. I don't know, I said, my voice thick with tears. I want to remember you. I love you, please, he whispered as his edges started to fade. Please try to remember me, Bella, honey. I cried. Don't go. He gave me a sympathetic stare before disappearing completely. That's when I started sobbing. My mother held me more tightly to her chest, chanting over and over that I'd be okay. The dream had tugged on my memory, tugged on my mind, and I knew for a fact, that I didn't get lost that day in the woods. I also knew that I had to figure out what had happened. Why those golden eyes haunted me. I'd figure it out if it killed me. Monday. Today was just the same as any other day. My alarm clock screeched and I got up, stepping into the shower. I washed my body, imagining that all my troubles could just flow down into the drain. I slowly guided the shower curtain away as I stepped, all dripping wet, onto the bathroom mat. I stood there for long enough to watch the fog of the mirror fall away and reveal my reflection. My brown eyes were bloodshot again. I must not have slept well. Then there was my ultra-pale skin that could pass as cling wrap over the thin flesh of my organs. The only thing that was remotely voluminous on my body is the mahogany strands of gently curling hair that find their way to the small of my back. Other than that, I am sickly and pale looking, too skinny to even look undead. But most days I don't care, like today. I sighed, opening the bathroom door and stepping out, wrapping the towel more tightly around my shivering wet body. I groaned when I saw the sun shining through my bedroom window from behind the curtains. Something about the light unnerved me. I still couldn't put my finger on it. I got to my new car. Well, new to me, considering it was a 2001, but it ran, and that's all I cared about. Jacksonville was a strangely easy place to drive around. There was never any snow, and for the few months that I'd been here, it had only rained about 2 times. And I hated it, and I hated that I hated it. I drove along the now familiar road, my eyes roaming the forest. Well, if it could be called that. I seemed to be hypnotized by it for a moment, then I began shaking violently. I pulled my truck over to the side of the road, knowing it wasn't safe to be driving when I'm like this. But it hit me so fast, so hard, that I couldn't believe I hadn't thought of it before. And before I could even finish the thought, I was making a U-turn straight back to my mom and Phil's house. I knew exactly what I needed to do. Yes, I couldn't believe I hadn't thought of it before. I was going home, to Forks, where I should be, and then I was going in the woods. Bella, my mother pleaded, the worry in her voice clear. Please, baby, just stay here. I choked back tears. I'm going home, Mom. I have to. If you want me to be happy, you'll let me go. I tried to make my voice as convincing as possible. Love you, Mom, I whispered, hugging her. She hugged me back fiercely. You be careful, my Bella. Please. I promise. I whispered. Love you, Bella. Love you more, Mom. I hopped on the first plane out of Jacksonville, my stomach tense but excited. So close. So close I could feel it now. I only had a few more hours, a few more days until the mystery that had been haunting me so completely for the past several months was finally gone and revealed. This had to be it. And I couldn't believe I hadn't thought of it before. The thing that would bring my memory back for sure. The forest had to be it. Maybe some sort of déjà vu would bring it back. I opened the window shade just to look at the green forest stretched out before me. Home. The golden eyes popped into my mind again, and I winced before muttering almost silently, I'll see you soon. I promise. I walked to the edge of the yard, running my hand along the bristles of the pine tree standing there. Nothing. I took a step into the thick underbrush, loving the way the moist and cool air felt on my face. I didn't know why I'd ever left. I stepped a few steps further, running my fingers along every branch or bush I could find. I silently prayed that I wouldn't come across a poisonous flower or bush, which would be just my luck, but even that worry couldn't stop me. I felt so close. So close. Nothing could stop me now. I walked a few more feet in, enjoying the feel of the squishy earth under my Converse sneakers. I was home. Twigs snapped as I walked, and I tripped every few moments, but I continued walking forward, on the familiar paths, and even when I dared, off the path. I just kept walking. Only a few more miles, I told myself, and you'll be put at ease. I could feel something coming, anything. I had to have walked about 5 miles into the woods before I saw an opening in the woods. I began walking faster, which of course meant I was tripping that much more, but I couldn't care less. I finally made it to the light, and I stepped out into what had to be the most beautiful meadow I'd ever seen. It was around noon. I could tell by the way the sun was directly above me. I was actually pretty pleased with myself. I'd made good time. I looked around the perfectly round meadow, my eyes roaming over what could only be described as paradise. Wildflowers speckled the ground randomly, just in time for spring. It had been at least 7 months since I'd roamed the woods, and I didn't know what I expected to find even now. It was frustrating, looking around, that nothing was happening. I sat down in the tall grass, lying back and just looking up at the sky. Maybe I'd just have to let this kick of mine go. The eyes that haunted me surely had to go away over time, didn't they? Bella. The confused voice came from somewhere close to me and I sighed, opening my eyes. What the hell are you doing here? His voice was frustrated, and it made me want to laugh. I couldn't stay in Jacksonville for one more second, Jacob. I hated it, truly. Forks as my home. I smiled warmly at him and something close to shock flashed in his eyes. He watched me warily. Well, I'm glad you're back. He winked and I chuckled, making him smile brighter. It had been so long since I'd seen that smile. Come over here, you big dog. I said, standing up and wrapping my arms tightly around him. He laughed, and the sound seemed to bounce off the trees and come back to us. Oh, Bells, I'm so glad you're back. He whispered, taking my face in his large hands. How did you know I was out here? I asked suddenly, grinning. I felt so safe here with Jacob. I didn't. I was just making sure everything is calm and I smelled you. I giggled, but didn't break our gaze. I'm glad you're here. So am I, he whispered, tilting his face closer to mine. I knew what was coming after this. There was no turning back, no going anywhere. I still had no idea if this was what I wanted, but I liked Jake so much. Would it really be so bad to spend the rest of my life with him? To have a life full of security, warmth, and, eventually, love. It didn't seem so wrong to me. So I tilted my head up towards his slowly, wrapping my arms around his neck. A shrill ringing suddenly sounded from nowhere. Jake and I both jumped, and he growled as he pulled his phone out of his pocket. He talked for a moment, then Jake suddenly let out a low hiss, and before I could even blink he was running from me, towards the woods. I gotta go, Bells. He called over his shoulder right before he disappeared through the thick brush. It could only be one thing. Only one thing would make Jake go that crazy. I felt a chill go down my spine. Vampire. Vampire. I shivered as Jake disappeared into the thick green, shuddering. I stood up and brushed off my clothes, unsure of what to do. I looked around and listened intently for any minor sound. I sighed when I didn't hear anything, and decided I might as well start heading back. I looked around the perfect meadow one last time, thinking so hard it hurt. Nothing. Blankness. I took a deep breath before heading back into the woods, finding the route I'd come easily. It took me a few hours, but I made it back to the truck with a few minor scrapes and bruises. I'd done well. I unlocked the door of my rusty pickup, getting into the cab and starting the engine. I debated calling Jake, but I didn't know if he'd left his cell with his clothes back in the woods. A movement out of the corner of my eye caught my attention and I whipped my head to stare out of the driver's side window. There was another blur, and my stomach sank to my feet. Vampire. I pushed on the gas pedal hard, my tires squealing. A strange sense of adrenaline pumped through me then, and all I could think was, escape, escape, live, live, live. I let out a choked scream as the huge werewolf sprang out of the greenery, pumping his feet furiously in the direction the vampire was heading. I was on the road by now, speeding away, toward Forks and safety. I almost laughed aloud as I saw the place I'd just been disappearing behind me. I'd escaped. I was so euphoric that when I heard a huge clank on the back of my truck I screamed so loud I hurt my own ears. Suddenly there was something at my door, something solid, a body. I tried to stifle another scream but it came anyway as I swerved on the road. The driver's side opened and I tried in vain to crawl to the other end of the cab. As if that would stop whoever that was. A strange sense of déjà vu came over me, and I could have bet my life that this had happened before. Shish, shish, Bella, it's me, I cried in relief when I saw Jacob shut the door behind him, taking my place at the wheel and getting the truck back on the right side of the road. He began speeding away again. Vampire? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Jake said through clenched teeth. He was right on the Forks line when Sam found him. He made Seth phase back and call me. He shook his head. Filthy bloodsucker keeps running away from us. What are you gonna do? Jake laughed without humor. We're gonna catch him, Bells. He flashed a set of pearly white teeth. I shivered. Jake drove me to Charlie's, waiting until I got in the house before he ran into the woods to phase. I locked the front door as I stepped in, finding Charlie sitting on the couch watching baseball. Good. He was safe. I walked up the stairs, wincing as the third step to the top creaked when I stepped on it. I began crying as I flopped into my bed, the past day creeping into my consciousness. I hadn't found anything. Nothing. I thought for sure that would work and I was met with disappointment. Then the vampire thing happened. As if that wasn't enough to bring a person to the insane asylum. If only Charlie knew or Renee. I shook my head. So close and my life could have ended back there. My tears dried on my pillow as I slipped into unconsciousness. I dreamed of golden eyes again that night, his eyes more honey-filled than ever. He was pleading with me again, pleading for me to remember him. I'm going to be here until you remember. He'd whispered, and I felt a shiver run down my spine even in my sleep. My head was killing me when I woke up in the morning. The dream I'd had the night before tugged on my mind, and I ran his words over and over in my head. I'm going to be here until you remember. Where would he be? And most importantly, who is it? I'd come to only one conclusion in my mind, that I'd met someone. That my accident in the woods wasn't so much as an accident, but that something had happened. I had met someone, a man with golden eyes. I shook my head as I turned onto the old dirt road. It was Jake's road, and I'd traveled it 1,000,000 times before. I jumped when I saw a figure on the side of the road, but relaxed when I realized it was just Seth. Seth who had found me in the woods. Seth who could probably tell me something. Seth. I was yelling his name before I could roll my window down. He didn't seem startled, but I knew that was because he could probably hear the roar of my truck from a mile away. Bella. He smiled happily as I pulled up beside him. What are you doing? I need your help, Seth. I said, a desperate tone in my voice. But you can't tell anyone. Right here, he said, his voice sure. He pointed to a spot right next to a tree. The moss on the tree was low, and there was a large rock beside it. You looked like you were propped up, Seth explained, doing a motion with his hands. There was no way you could have fallen. I knew it, I muttered, then I turned to him. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Well, I didn't think it mattered, but now that I think about it, it was like someone wanted you to be found. It was true, there was only about 10 feet of trees between the road and the spot we were at now. It wasn't an accident, Seth, I said, shaking my head. I backed up and leaned against the tree, waiting for the déjà vu to hit me. I know that now, he said, smiling. What do you think happened? I shook my head. I have no idea, I whispered. Then Seth froze. I looked up and his entire body had gone rigid, his shoulders tense and his jaw clenched tight. What's wrong? I asked. When I found you, Bella, he cut off, his voice horrified. You smelled like. I smelled like what? I demanded, impatient. You smelled like vampire, Bella. It wasn't a strong smell, almost like someone tried to cover it up. But I remember smelling something off. Shit, I should have recognized the scent. What are you saying, Seth? I said slowly, my head felt like it was full of jello. I'm saying that I think you were with a vampire, Bella. I waited until his words sunk in and then my face mirrored his, but only for a moment. I was with a vampire. Then it all came rushing back. Golden eyes, cold skin. Everything my dreams had been sending to me. Vampire. Seth, I don't want you to tell anyone this. Do you understand me? Can I trust you? His eyes looked unsure for a moment. You can't ask me to do that, Bells. I have to tell them. No, Seth, please. Just wait. Try to keep it from Sam while you're in wolf form. I need you to do this for me. Please, please. I was begging by the end. I saw the unease in his expression, then his face twisted into a grimace. Okay, fine. You can count on me, Bells. I knew using Seth was selfish, but I also knew he was the only werewolf that would not tell Sam about the vampire thing. I didn't even know why I didn't want anyone but us to know. I think my dreams had something to do with it, especially since Golden Eyes was so close now I could almost taste him. I shivered. So I had been with a vampire. A hostile, vile, repulsive creature. And yet I couldn't stop thinking about it. And if I had been with a vampire, why hadn't it killed me? Was it possible that the beasts, as Jake called them, actually weren't beasts at all? Or at least this one hadn't been. Jacob. Poor Jake. It felt like a betrayal, not telling him, but I didn't want him to do anything rash. I was so close to being free of the nightmare that I could taste it. I needed it, bad. Seth and I were in my old truck, driving back to La Push. Thank you, so much, I murmured as I pulled up in front of his house. He gave me a sly smile. Anything to help, Bells. And don't worry, my lips are sealed. He made a motion of locking up his lips and he threw the invisible key over his shoulder. I chuckled. I'll see you later, Clearwater. See ya, Swan. I was happy for the silence now, so I could finally mull things over in my head. So a vampire had left me in the woods. But how did that tie in with my dreams and the man with golden eyes? How did I even meet the vampire? I gritted my teeth together and resisted the urge to pound on the steering wheel. Nothing made sense. The sun was about to set, having made its way to the western part of the sky. I had a few hours, why not be proactive? I drove my truck out of Forks, away from Charlie, away from Jacob. I didn't even know exactly where I was going. Just that I should get there. Good God, I groaned. How frustrating this was. I parked my truck on the side of the road, decided that was as good a spot as any. I reached the edge of the trees but hesitated, my hand reaching out to touch the soft ferns. Then I was running. I ran like a madwoman through the damp grass and tree limbs, falling every so often when my feet tangled with the bracken. But I'd just pick myself up and continue on. I had to get somewhere fast. The feeling of anxiety that I'd felt on the way over here increased tenfold, my heart beating quickly and my body broke out into a cold sweat. I saw a clearing of light up ahead, not like a meadow but more like a break in the trees. I ran for it, desperate to get to the light. By this time I could see little of the sun through the thick leaves, which made it 10 times harder to see. I was inches away from the clearing. And it all happened very fast then. I saw a blur, and my tongue got stuck in my throat. It whipped around me, and I felt the wind as if I were sticking my head out of an airplane in flight. In the next second there was something solid in front of me, and just as the adrenaline kicked in for me to run the other way, I smashed directly into whatever was standing there. I landed in a heap on the ground, having bounced off the hard object like it was a brick wall. It stood above me, unaffected by my blow. Only one thing crossed my mind as I got up on my elbows to get a better look. Vampire. And I couldn't find the urge to run away. Couldn't find the urge to want to run away. It was curiosity that had me firmly planted where I was on the ground. And hope. A ridiculous notion. Bella. I froze, every muscle in my body tensing up. It was a question, it was a term of recognition. Whoever this was already knew me. Are you okay? A female. A woman's voice, should I know her? As she moved closer toward me, I could more clearly see her face. My breath stopped in my throat. Standing in front of me was one of the most beautiful human I'd ever seen. Her hair fell in long blonde waves down over her shoulders almost all the way to her waist. Her body was that of an angel, covered with designer clothes that fit into all her curves perfectly. But that was not why I was staring. Her eyes were a brilliant shade of gold, the butterscotch striking in contrast to her pale skin. She leaned down in a fluid moment, helping me right myself, her skin as cold and hard as ever. As the last time she'd touched me like this. It came rushing back very quickly to me now. Rose. I whispered, oh my God, Rose. I couldn't seem to wake up. Couldn't seem to find my eyes. My dream tugged at my memory, trying to tell me something, I was sure. Isabella, is that your name? A velvet voice asked. I recognized the voice and I almost screamed in terror. I fluttered my eyelids, trying to focus in on his face. This may be the last thing I saw before I died. The tears came to my eyes, and I blinked them back furiously, trying to see something. Anything. When I finally saw his face, his lovely, beautiful face, I flinched back. He was close enough to touch. And then another memory, just as vivid as the first. He hesitated. We're not like most vampires. We don't drink human blood. We drink the blood of animals. I saw your eyes. They were red. You killed a person. He hung his head. I did not mean to drink the human's blood. I didn't check the trail. I was already in my hunting set of mind. He was too close. Edward winced, his mind far away in thought. He looked back to me. It was a horrid accident. I hate myself for it. But that's when I heard James's thoughts. His face turned into a furious scowl. He was so happy he'd found you. So happy he could feed on someone who smelled so mouthwatering, he was growling now. That's why I had to stop him. Because a few minutes before that, I had been the monster. I couldn't let him live. A young girl like you. I had to save you. He shook his head, trying to clear the memory. And then another. His fingers brushed across my cheek. I've never been one to enjoy the kill. He whispered, looking away. I always hated what I am. I've never enjoyed slaughtering innocent creatures to get what I need. He looked back to me. But I've never met anyone like you, Isabella. I've walked around for years, you have no idea how long, thinking I was complete in myself. Until I met you. That day I found in you in the woods. The moment I looked into your eyes, I knew I had to keep you. I knew that I had to make myself strong enough to be good for you. And even now, even when I know I'm not good enough for you, I couldn't stop myself from trying to keep you for myself. What are you saying? I whispered. It wasn't just the need to save someone from that vile creature. His voice got a little tense until he calmed himself. It was the need to save you. I saw you in his mind, your beautiful brown eyes alert and focused with fear. You were so beautiful I couldn't. He was unable to finish. It was the need to save you. The memory of his silky voice rang in my head, those words clear and true as I remembered the way his eyes had burned into mine. Edward had saved me from James. A bad vampire. He'd taken me to his home and then, oh God, Rosalie held me to her for a few minutes while I cried. I finally sniffled and looked up at her. Where is he? Where is Edward? My love, leave yourself behind. Beat inside me, leave me blind. My love, you have found peace. You were searching for release. You took the fall into the call. You took a chance and you took the fall for us. You came thoughtfully, loved me faithfully. You taught me honor. You did it for me. Tonight you will sleep for good. You will lie for me, my love. Where is he? Where is Edward? She stared at me for a long moment, her eyes speculating. Then she sighed. He's not here, Bella. He's in Alaska. My heart sunk and I hung my head. How foolish of me to think he'd come back to this place. Rosalie saw my hurt expression and continued. He's visiting some friends in Alaska. He's sort of just. She seemed to be at a loss for words, but I let her continue just so I could hear the bell chime of her voice. I shook my head, choking back tears. And the others? They're here. Alice and Jasper, Carlisle and Esme, Emmett. I named them all off, remembering each of them as I did. A small smile lit her features. You remember everything, don't you? Now I do. I nodded. She shook her head. I knew this wouldn't last forever. How many times did I tell him how easily it would be for you to remember everything? She sighed loudly then winced. Wow, you actually do smell pretty good. I took a small step away, but smiled when I saw the amused expression on her face. What are you doing in the woods? I asked. I could feel the conversation turning slightly, and I couldn't stand to say goodbye just yet. She smiled, flashing all her razor-sharp teeth. I was hunting. She winked at me, and I resisted the urge to shiver. There has to be some good deer around here somewhere. Rosalie wrinkled her nose, as if the thought repulsed her, but she had to do it anyway. Because she was good. Genuinely, wholeheartedly, good. Apart from her obsession with her own beauty, of course. After what felt like hours of arguing with the insanely gorgeous blonde vampire, she finally agreed to take me to see Esme and Carlisle. He's going to kill me for this. She shook her head as she picked me up, and the trees blurred as we made our way through the forest. I closed my eyes so I didn't get sick, and I had a feeling Rose wasn't going easy on me. We arrived to a house in the middle of the woods, it seemed, but I couldn't be sure. I didn't recognize the house at all, and that surprised me a little. It's the same one, Rose assured me, guessing my thoughts. I shook my head from side to side, wondering why I couldn't remember. You barely ever went outside, remember? She chuckled without humor. I'm sure you'll remember when we get inside. She was absolutely right. The moment I stepped into the foyer, I broke down into tearless sobs. Rose held me for a few moments, until I heard gentle footsteps enter the room. I looked up, and my bottom lip quivered before I bit it with my lip. My knees wobbled and I nearly fell. Then I hurled myself across the room and into her arms. Alice, I cried, my joyful tears soaking her shirt. Oh, Alice, Bella, she acknowledged me, smiling lightly. I had no doubt she'd already foreseen Rosalie bringing me here. What in the hell were you thinking, Rose? Her voice was scolding but her eyes were soft as she petted my hair. Rose laughed. She's very convincing. And what Edward doesn't know won't hurt him. Alice narrowed her eyes. Do you really think you can keep this from him? He reads minds, Rose. At some point or another, this will come up. You think I don't know that? Rose sounded slightly offended. We all stood there for an awkward moment, then Esme burst into the room. Her arms were already wide open for me, and she looked like she'd be crying if she could. Bella, she said, the joy so evident in her voice it made my eyes water, and before I knew it I was crying again. We embraced, then she held me at arm's length, looking me over. What have you been up to, darling? She asked, and her voice reminded me so much of my own mother's. Nothing much. Missing you guys, I answered honestly, and she wiped the tears from my eyes. I knew I had to be getting back. But I didn't want to go. Not at all. Esme's soft face seemed to glow orange in the light from the fireplace, and the coffee sitting in front of me on the table was all but forgotten. I'd called Charlie earlier, telling him I had some errands to run and I'd be out late, and he had accepted without any further explanation. I was grateful for that. Alice had stepped out for a few hours, considering she hadn't been hunting in a while. The fire crackled and we all started into it, seemingly mesmerized. How long? Esme asked, and I jumped. How long what? How long have you remembered? She asked curiously. I remembered just today, I said, trying to keep up with her line of thought. Only since today, and you're sitting here, with us, completely at ease. She shook her head. Won't your wolf friend be worried? No, I shook my head. Jake doesn't know that I know. She nodded, as if she assumed as much. How long? I whispered, unable to keep the pain from my voice. She turned to me, giving me her full attention again. How long are you guys staying? She shook her head sadly. Not very long, I'm afraid. No one was supposed to know we're here. Usually, When we get settled into a place, we don't leave for a very long time. But considering no one knows about us, apart from you, we'll have to be moving on to Alaska here before long. I winced. Alaska. Edward, she noticed, leaning over to pat my shoulder. He's a wreck, Bella. She murmured, and I almost wasn't sure I'd heard her right. I was about to ask for clarification when Esme suddenly straightened up, and so did Rose, as if shocked. They both stared out the window, and Rose could barely mutter a, "What in the hell is Alice doing?" Before the pixie shot through the doorway, her hair windblown. "Edward," Alice hissed, running over to me at vampire speed. "Edward," I repeated the name, even though it burned a little. "Yes," she said, her voice frantic. I struggled to catch the words. "He's coming home early from hunting." Why does he make the rash decisions? He knows how much it bugs me. "Edward is coming," Rose clarified, her eyes shocked. "No shit," Alice yelled in Rose's direction. "Mary Alice." Language, Esme scolded. Then everyone went silent again. "I should leave," I mumbled, turning to get up. Alice gently pushed me back down. "There's no time, Bella. He's on his way." My heart began beating frantically and I felt as though I'd faint. Could my heart handle this? Well, now was the time to find out. All the vampires in the room seemed to freeze to stone as we heard the front door open. Emmett's voice was the first I heard, and I could see that Rose was having a serious battle within herself to run over and jump into his arms. They were in the foyer, still out of sight, and I thanked God for that. Because when I heard his voice, I could have melted. "What the hell is that?" Great first words after months of not hearing his voice. Good enough for me, though, because my eyes filled with tears and my heart gave a painful thump. I closed my eyes, choking back a sob. I knew they were all in the room now, I could feel their gazes on me. I felt Esme scoot closer to me, putting a protective arm around my shoulders. "What the hell?" Edward's voice was surprisingly soft. "What is she doing here? Why was he speaking like I wasn't even there?" I opened my eyes, and in front of me stood the most beautiful person. He was an angel. He must have been. No one could be as beautiful as him. His eyes were right on me, and I met his gaze. His lower lip trembled for a moment, then I heard a soft whimper. "Bella." I knew I'd heard him correctly, but there were no words to express what I was feeling at that time. Love was too insignificant of a word. I smiled softly at him, and I knew his gaze mirrored mine. I saw adoration, surprise, relief, pain, hunger, and most of all love. "Bella," he whispered brokenly again, and reached out for me. And there wasn't a room full of vampires around us. It was just me and him and a crackling and life-shattering sensation shuddering my chest. And he was there in front of me, his golden eyes smoldering. He took my hands in his, and I couldn't help it anymore. I jumped at him, clutching with tenacious fingers at his shirt, eager to take everything in. His smell was amazing. There was no cologne in the world that could compare. He clutched at me just as tightly, his nose in my neck, his fingers stroking my hair softly. It could have been mere seconds we held onto each other. It could have been days. But I never wanted to let go. He pulled back first, his expression pained. He pushed a strand of hair behind my ear. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice slightly exhausted. I knew he was just as happy to see me as I was him. "Rosalie," I murmured, and he turned his head to glare toward his absurdly beautiful sister. I thought he was going to growl at her, or yell at her anyway, but his expression softened after a few moments. "Thank you," he said, turning back to me. "I'll never be able to repay you." And his eyes met mine again. His fingers interlaced with my own, and his voice dropped. "I'm so sorry, Bella. So sorry." "Shish," I whispered, grabbing his face with my free hand. "Don't, please, just feel." And so we did. For an immeasurable time we sat there, staring into each other's eyes, forgiving. No words were said. No words had to be said. There was no other reason I was put on this earth than to be with him. I loved him. God, I loved him. Nothing else existed but that fact. After a while I heard Emmett and Jasper clear their throats, and Edward and I looked up to see Carlyle sitting next to Esme on the sofa, Esme looking like she'd be bawling if it were possible. They smiled lightly at us. "Welcome back, Bella," Carlyle said in his soothing voice. I don't want to go, I whispered, clutching at him. He frowned. I won't be far. What do you mean? I pondered, smiling when he did. You'll see. You won't be alone tonight. Promise. I promise. He giggled, then kissed me on the cheek. Now, go on in. Charlie's getting anxious. I nodded my head, trusting him. I'll see you soon then. He grinned. I'll see you soon. I love this place, but it's haunted without you. My tired heart is beating so slow. Our hearts sing less than we wanted. We wanted. Our hearts sing 'cause we do not know. We do not know. It took me longer than I would have hoped for me to escape to the sanctuary of my room. Where have you been? Charlie demanded, getting up from the couch. I sighed loudly. I was down at La Push. I said, hoping he wouldn't investigate that. His body relaxed. You have fun with Jake. I wasn't with Jake, I said quickly. I went over to Emily's for a little while. Since when did lying come so easily to me? Well, there's leftover pizza in the fridge. I didn't bother trying to cook. He murmured, already inching himself toward the TV. Thanks, I muttered, and I went in to clatter around the kitchen a little before dragging my feet up the stairs. I hoped he wouldn't decide to check on me. I jerked the door to my room open, eager, but not exactly sure what I'd find. I definitely didn't expect to see Edward lounging on my bed, the picture of ease. You're here. I smiled, ecstatic to see him. I'm here. He sat up, pulling me down next to him and tucking me under his arm. We sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, and I listened to his steady breathing. He turned to me. I'm so sorry, he whispered, his eyes tortured. I should have never. Oh, God. He hung his head. Don't, I whispered, desperate to make him feel better. I'm fine now. We're fine now. I took his face in my hands. I love you, I said solemnly, and surprisingly my voice did not waver. I love you, he repeated, looking deep into my eyes before brushing his lips softly against mine. Heaven, I know you won't forgive me that easily, he whispered. I know it will take a while for you to trust me again. So will you try? That's a dumb question. Answer me, Bella, I need to hear you say it. Yes, Edward, yes, I can forgive you. I looked deep into his eyes, my words ringing with sincerity. Good, he said, placated for the moment. Because I really don't know how I'd ever live without you. Come here, I whispered, grasping his hard face in my hands and kissing him in earnest. He kissed me back, his lips as desperate and needy against mine. And in the brief moment when our lips disconnected, he whispered my name like a lullaby, like only I could save him from whatever demons he was throwing on himself. My head was swimming by the time he pulled back, only to nuzzle his head into my neck and take a deep breath. Amazing, he whispered. You smell just the same as you always have. Of course I do. I giggled as his nose tickled the skin at my throat. What did you expect? Not this, surely. And I knew he wasn't talking about the smell of my blood anymore. When I came inside, when I noticed there was a human in the house, his eyes were far away, his voice low, I couldn't explain the hope I felt. I couldn't read what they were thinking, I got so excited. He kissed my nose. Then I came in and saw you. It was really you, after all this time. I thought I'd died and gone to heaven or hell. I didn't know which at the time. But it was heaven. Definitely heaven. I shook my head in disbelief. I remembered you. I mean, I couldn't remember, but I had these dreams about a man with golden eyes. I looked up to meet his butterscotch orbs and smiled. And I knew that I didn't just get lost in the woods. Everyone thought I was crazy. I chuckled. Jacob. Edward sighed bleakly. I heard anger and jealousy. Yeah, I nodded. I had to have Seth. He's the werewolf that found me anyway. I had to have him keep my searching a secret. I'd have gone mad if I couldn't have known. Then I ran into Rosalie, and it all came back. That fast. I shook my head in wonder. He held my hands in his own, bringing each palm up to his lips to kiss it. I was done waiting anyway. He said, his voice painful. I was done trying to get through a single day, it was too painful. I was ready to show up at your door, begging you for forgiveness. He chuckled sadly. I would have, if I thought you'd have remembered me. Chief probably would have gotten a restraining order against the strange guy who begged his daughter to love him. I would have remembered. I was sure. I know that now. But I just had to give you a chance at a normal and happy life. This, he gestured to himself, is not normal. I can understand if you grow out of me someday, Bella. I wouldn't detest you for it. I would never, I answered solemnly. Once I become a vampire we won't have to worry about it anymore. We can be with each other forever. I knew this statement would shock him, it was what I was aiming for. He needed to know that I had thought about this today while I was talking to Esme and Alice and Rosalie. I watched Esme and Alice dance around the kitchen gracefully, happily. I had watched Rosalie work on her car and afterwards give herself a makeover that could only be described as the makeup artist's dream. They all looked so happy. And even though I knew this wasn't always the case, I was ready for it. I wanted to be with Edward forever. Everything else could wait. He needed to know that I wanted this. That I wanted him. What? He whispered, his eyes full of agony. I want to become like you. I said again. He shook his head. You have no idea what you're asking. He sounded angry. I want you. Always. I said desperately, clutching at his shirt. He sighed loudly. You're so young, Bella. So beautiful. Your life has just merely begun. How are you so willing to give up your life for someone like me? Hell, that was the reason he trailed off. I thought that you were opposed to this life. That you were disgusted by it. I was. I hedged, picking at the collar of his shirt. But I'm sure now. I want to spend forever with you. He looked at me skeptically. What about your father? Your mother? Jacob? I winced. I hadn't thought of that. Exactly, he said, putting his hand under my chin so I'd look him in the eyes. We have plenty of time to discuss your renovations, Bella. But not tonight. Tonight, why don't you just sleep? I tried to argue. I didn't want him to leave just yet. But my yawn gave me away. He smiled. It's okay, sweetheart. I'll still be here when you wake up. He tightened his arms and situated himself more comfortably on the pillows to prove his point. Promise, I whispered, already snuggling into his chest. He smelled so good. I promise. Good night, my love. Sweet dreams. Good night, I answered, already half asleep because he started to hum a lullaby to me, officially soothing my nerves and sending me into the blackness. What the hell? He snarled. It wasn't to get my attention this time. He was mad. I didn't know, Jake. I didn't remember anything in the woods. I know. Save it, Jake, I whispered, my voice cracking. I could feel Edward's calming presence behind me, waiting, I think, for Jacob to snap. It was slightly irritating that he'd insisted on coming, but in a way I appreciated it. You're crossing a line, Bella. Oh, how I longed to hear him say, bells, again. Then don't draw one, I pleaded. He stood there for a few moments, shaking, trying to calm himself. I took a tentative step forward. I ignored Edward's hand on my arm as I stepped forward in the high grass, the meadow just the same as always. Jake, I whispered, I need you, and I love you. I heard his intake of breath and especially hated myself for what I was about to say. So don't make me choose. Because it'll be him. It's always been him. Jacob looked almost confused for a moment. Our faces were so close together. I could feel the warmth emanating off of him. The warmth that would forever belong to my Jacob. My personal son. Bella, he whispered, his voice pained. I swallowed heavily, taking a few steps back. Goodbye, Jacob. I winced when I heard Edward's voice behind me, pulling me towards him. No, you don't fucking speak for her. Jake roared, and I felt myself being pulled away quickly. The ice-cold hands formed like steel manacles around my wrists and refused to let me go. Bella, get out of here, he ordered in a low voice. I wanted to do as Edward asked, but I couldn't find it in me to move. I was frozen with fear and anticipation. Jake was shaking, his face turning a red color that was odd compared to the color of his russet skin. You can't bite her, he snarled, his words sending a chill down my spine. I won't let you ruin her. Edward's face was grim. But if it's my choice then it has nothing to do with you. I spoke up. No, Jake roared, taking a few large bounds toward us. Edward stood in front of me, blocking me from Jacob's view. I won't let you become a leech, Bella. You know what I'll have to do to you. I won't have a choice. Jake, I whispered, my voice broken. Tears leaked over the edge as I stepped around Edward. He made a move to stop me but I continued forward. I opened my arms and wrapped them around Jacob. I squeezed tightly when he didn't respond. I know that you think you're doing what's best for me. I sighed. His warmth felt amazing. But you're just hurting me, Jacob. I want you to be a part of my life. Forever. Bella, he said, and for once he sounded just as broken as I felt. Please, please don't do this. How about we go somewhere, huh? Just you and me, like old times. I held onto him tightly and tried to find the will to pull away. We can't, Jake. I looked up at him as I stepped back, the loss of his warmth leaving my heart aching. Goodbye, Jake. I love you. I didn't bother hiding the warm tears that slipped down my cheeks, soaking my shirt. Bye, Bells, he whispered. Love you more. I didn't doubt that. You can catch me. Don't you run. Don't you run. If you live another day in this happy little house. The fire's here to stay. To light the night. To help us grow. To help us grow. It is not said. I always know. Amanda Seyfried, Little House. Forever takes me by a minute. While I'm here with you, I'm falling even more in love. With everything you do. Hold me in your arms. Look deep into my eyes. Don't turn away and let me go. Don't ever tell me lies. I swear I'll never lose you. In my arms I'll always hold. I'll never let you slip away. And leave nothing left untold. There aren't enough hours, in each passing day, to find all the words I wish I could say. Your kiss will last forever. Your touch forever warm. You'll guide me to the sunlight. And shield me from the storm. This is what I'm saying. With everything that's true, I swear on my life, that I will forever love you. I saw the bouncing curls reflecting the light in the sun before I saw her face. She was giggling, of course, her golden locks shining like a summer's day. She was beautiful, my baby girl, Renesmee. She's full of spunk today. Edward warned me, leaning over to give me a kiss before she ran through the door and straight into my arms. Mommy, she yelled, her little voice full of joy. How's my baby girl? I cooed. Daddy took me hunting. She grinned, her teeth gleaming. I turned to my gloriously beautiful, still 17-year-old husband. I made supper for her, I said, narrowing my eyes. Renesmee pulled on my hair a little to get my attention again. I like the deer better, Mom. I know you do, I said as she laughed, the most beautiful sound in my world. She jumped down from my arms and bounded into her room, probably getting ready for her play date with her cousins. Jake and Leah's kids weren't exactly related to her, but we thought of them that way anyhow, they were so close. Leah said she could spend the night over there. I said, batting my eyelashes at Edward seductively. He grinned, coming over to sweep me into his arms. Such a clever girl, he grinned, before capturing my lips in a kiss that would have stopped my heart if it had been beating. When I looked back to my years as a human, I remembered them fondly. Edward and I had dated for a grand total of 3 months before we'd come to the conclusion that we should just get married. We were soul mates. What was the point in waiting? So Alice had gotten to plan our fairy tale wedding. Everything went absolutely wonderfully. I would be forever grateful to my talented sister-in-law. On our honeymoon we'd gotten pregnant, much to both of our surprise and alarm on Edward's part. The delivery was interesting, but I'd lived just long enough for Edward to change me. And that brought us full circle. I didn't regret my decision. The pain of transformation was hell, literally, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. Edward set me down as I glanced warily at the pot on the stove. I think maybe I'll just have Leah hand this over to Emily when she comes to pick up Renesmee later. I'm sure she'd appreciate the extra food. Making up with Jacob had come shortly before Edward and I had married, and to be honest, I didn't even know if I could have gotten married happily and truly enjoyed the day if my best friend would have been mad at me. Jake and Leah, a girl from the reservation, had ended up falling in love. Actually he'd imprinted on her something I'd never understand. But eventually they settled down with a few kids that were now Renesmee's age, sort of. My daughter was constantly growing, at a much more rapid pace than a normal child. She was half human, half vampire. A very unique mix in the vampire world. Not the first of her kind, but a rarity for sure. But we loved her to death, and when we'd realized that her growth would eventually stop, that she wouldn't be a 40-year-old in 4 years, we were much happier. I couldn't remember such joy in my human life, and I was pretty sure my human heart wouldn't have been capable of holding so much love and contentment. I was confident of this as Edward wrapped his arms around my waist, and I knew exactly what he wanted. I expanded my shield, my special power out to him, letting him in, temporarily, on my thoughts. I thought of us together, holding, kissing, loving. I thought of how happy he made me. How happy I was. I thought of how I wouldn't trade my life for anything. The thought of our family sitting around the fireplace, snuggled up on the couch as Renesmee told us about her day, begging us for stories about our human lives and how we'd met. An amazed smile washed over his face, just like it did every time I allowed him to read my thoughts. I had gained so much in such a short amount of time. More than my wildest dreams. He smiled. I'm not all that special, you know. I smacked his chest, playfully outraged. How dare you? You're everything. You're absolutely everything to me. He kissed me then, his lips soft and inviting over mine. He felt warm. He felt so right. I felt absolutely like I should in his arms. Did you ever imagine anything like this? I asked him, taking the pot full of spaghetti and putting it into a Tupperware container. No, he admitted. I never thought I'd be capable of this much happiness. I couldn't agree more. We lay in our bed that night, completely wrapped up in each other. We never really stopped, not until morning anyway, but we stilled for a few moments, listening to the water run outside in the stream, the small animals scurrying through the forest. Tonight we could be a little extra passionate, considering Renesmee was spending the night at Jake's. Do you ever wonder about what happens when we die? Edward asked, brushing a few strands of hair away from my face. No, I answered. I try not to think like that. Leave it to my husband to be totally cynical. Do you think we're damned? He whispered, pained. I leaned up on my elbows and looked him straight in the eyes as I took his face in my hands. You couldn't be damned, Edward. Not with a soul like yours. Neither could Alice, or Jasper, or Carlisle, or Esme, or Rosalie, or Emmett. Or our daughter. He scoffed. I know our daughter isn't damned. That's absolutely absurd. Well then don't worry about us. He nodded, placated. Now, Mr. Cullen, I said, leaning down to kiss his neck down to his chest and back up again. Where were we? He chuckled. Well, Mrs. Cullen, I couldn't help the chill on my spine as those words left his lips. I think we were right about here. He flipped us over and I giggled as he hovered over me, kissing me with so much love and passion that I was sure I would pass out if I were mortal. He thrust into me in one quick movement, one that would be completely undecipherable to a human if one had witnessed it. His thrusts were quick and jerky, his body shuddering as we came closer to our climax. Wave after wave of pleasure hit me, every nerve ending in my body feeling like it was on fire. He made a guttural sound in his throat that only seemed to turn me on more. Even after the pinnacle of our lovemaking, he didn't stop. He barely even pulled out. We just continued moving together in tandem, two perfect molds, fitting together. Forever. He took my face in his hands. I love you, he whispered hoarsely, leaning down to kiss my forehead. I love you too, always, I vowed, our eyes never breaking contact. Forever and ever and ever. He murmured. That sounds exactly right to me. And then we continued blissfully into this small but perfect piece of forever. I heard his footsteps before his glorious body came into view. Love, he whispered, the air whooshing around him as he came to a stop in front of me. I leaned forward and wrapped my arms around his shoulders, burying my face in his neck and inhaling. He held me tighter as the silent sobs racked my body. If I was able to cry, tears would be streaming down my face and onto his shirt. It hurts, I whispered, clutching to him like a lifeboat in the middle of the ocean. I know, baby, he whispered, kissing my forehead. I know. I let out a shuddering breath as he laid me down on the bed. He took the black dress of my body. He slid the black pantyhose I had on down my legs, followed closely by my underwear. Then my bra. I didn't even notice he had already taken off his clothes at a speed that wouldn't be visible to me if I was human. If I was human, which I wasn't, not anymore. His fingers scorched a trail down my body, setting me on fire with his touch and momentarily taking me out of my trance. Edward, I groaned aloud as his fingers found my center. Oh, baby, he wasted no time, replacing his fingers with his mouth in a matter of seconds. I arched up off the bed, hearing the groan of the wood of the bed as we pressed down on it. You know how amazing you taste? He asked me, clearly rhetorical. He accentuated his words with a lick. Like the finest wine. If we were human, I wouldn't need meals. I'd just devour you, all day long. Oh, God, I squirmed. Edward, please, please, baby, please. He looked up at me, his eyes amused but careful. Please, what, Bella? Be specific. I moaned loudly, my hips coming up and then back down on the bed, and I heard a large crack as the wooden frame beneath us snapped. It was an easy thing to ignore, something that happened all the time. I was surprised we didn't keep spare bed frames lying around for things like this. Our eyes caught and we both stared at each other for a moment before erupting into soft chuckles. Well, chuckles from him. I probably sounded like a suffocating walrus. He moved up my body until his tip was directly at my opening, searching my eyes as he sought an invitation. He always did. Like a gentleman, I nodded minutely, and just like that he filled me, his hard length pressing into my softness. I couldn't help it. I screamed aloud, my entire body turning to goo and my fingers clutching his back as he moved in and out of me at a speed that would be disorienting if it didn't feel so goddamn good. We both wrapped around each other tightly, no space between us, coldness to coldness, hardness to softness. He buried his face in my neck, gently nipping at the skin there. Oh, fuck, I groaned, right when the feelings got even more intense. If it was possible, he moved even faster, his eyes closed with the exertion, and I felt him tense, all of him tense, and I knew he was close. Please don't ever leave me, I whispered passionately against his skin, kissing his strong shoulder. I won't, he promised, just a whimper, but it meant the world to me. I let go without a second thought, my body pulsing wildly around him as I felt him give a few more deep thrusts, hitting my spot both times. He went rigid as his body found release, and he buried his face in my hair and let out a groan so loud and sexy I thought I'd come again. It wouldn't have been the first time. Our bodies heaved with the labored breaths we took, even though we really didn't need them. He didn't roll off me, he didn't even stop thrusting. We didn't need to stop. We probably wouldn't stop now for a few days. And I knew that it was for me. We usually made a rule to stop after about a day, but I knew that this time we wouldn't. When I got the call a week ago that my best friend had been killed, time ceased to matter. It was Edward who pulled me out of it. He'd whispered sweet nothings and promises I knew he'd forever keep. He was my salvation, my angel in this world of dark. And I knew that we'd be okay eventually. It would always hurt, of course, losing Jake would never be something that would come easily to me or ever stop aching. But that was okay, because Edward was here, my prince in shining armor, my vampire husband, was here, and he'd never let me be alone. And here, in his arms, in the warmth of his comforting embrace, there's never anyone I've wanted more. I love you, I whispered, softly kissing his defined pectoral as waves of pleasure rolled throughout my body. I love you, too, he whispered back, more and more every day. I smiled softly. Imagine what it will be like in 200 years. You'll love me a lot then. He kissed me passionately. I already love you a lot. He smiled down at me as his body moved over mine. And I'll continue loving you. I just hope you don't get sick of me. I scoffed, which quickly turned into a moan. Not likely. I promised you forever. And that's what we're getting. He grinned, lacing our fingers and putting them above our heads. Forever and ever and ever. He whimpered, planting a hot kiss on my neck. That sounds just about right to me, I murmured before bringing our bodies closer together. The end. Thanks for watching.